afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, my name is Dontaira Terrell, entertainment journalist. I am so excited for today's guest. She's one of my dearest friends, always that voice of reason, logic, and just a soundboard whenever you need her. So Alena Conley, Mrs. Alena Conley, excuse me, wife, mom of four, and she is a productivity and performance coach based in Atlanta, Georgia. And today we're talking about, no, we're not talking about, we're celebrating the 1 year anniversary of her coaching program, The Reminder Remedy. And we're going to learn all about it today. So if you don't know, haven't heard, want to learn more, today, right now is the chance. You know, just being that we are progressive working women trying to create this scenario of work-life balance, some of us are figuring it out. It may or may not exist. If it does exist, how do you make it exist for you? Because everyone's definition of work-life balance is extremely different and looks extremely different. Also, how do you match self-care with professional progression? Because a lot of times as we're trying to reach our goals and just reach our everyday dynamics and dreams, sometimes the self-care gets a little lost. So she is here to remind us about everything and just trying to strike a healthy balance between, professional growth, family, day to day, but also staying true to you. So without further ado, hi.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am super stoked. I can't believe it's been a year already. And even as you kind of talk about the program, so much of that has evolved based on what I've learned from my clients and kind of what I've experienced in my own life. I think I was maybe 8 months pregnant or 7 months pregnant when I launched this last year. And so now, of course, being, with one additional child, everything that I thought about how I was going to run the business has completely changed. So I'm excited to kind of even talk about that part of it. But thank you so much. I'm excited to have a conversation with my girl.
Yes, I am too. So for those who don't know, what is the Reminder Remedy in a nutshell?
Yeah. So the Reminder Remedy is really a name that I came up with maybe back, I would say almost 4 years ago. It started out as just a podcast. I tell the story all the time of how back in 2013, when I had first relocated back to Atlanta, and I was trying to figure out what was next for me. I had just left my corporate job, and I knew that I wanted to do something around personal development, but I wasn't really sure what it looked like. And I just remember sitting in my car, parking garage, and just getting like really, really still. And the only thing that I heard was a voice saying, remind them. And I'm like, okay. So I took out my phone and I just started kind of finagling this word remind. Like, okay, what does that mean? How should I interpret it? Remind them to do this, remind them to be themselves, remind them to be true. So it's like all of these kind of reminders that really serve as this kind of return to self that becomes the remedy for life. And so that's really where the name came from. As the brand has evolved, the Reminder Remedy is really looking at our solutions to mindfully being productive, showing up, bringing in that whole woman approach. And so it is that constant reminder that the remedy to, feeling good, looking good is really making sure that we fully understand our values, that we understand our worth, and that we're being very intentional around that. It's funny how it worked out, because it's like when I started it, I really didn't even have a service. It was a hobby. And now that it has become like a full company, the name still serves its purpose. And so, I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
But you know what? I feel like you brought up such a good point in terms of, I know for me, just like I was telling you before we even started the call, I had so many fire drills this morning. And a lot of times I associate with being busy with being productive. And that's not always the case. But for you to say that you sat there, you listened to yourself, like, and that's how the idea came about. It kind of is a reflection of there's beauty in stillness. You don't always have to be on the go,
Right. Yeah.
So, question, because you are helping other women achieve their professional and personal development and extend grace to themselves. But have you been living up to it and extending that same amount of grace to yourself that you extend to others, or you tell other women to do for themselves?
Yeah. Well, I mean, put me on the spot, why don't you? Are you practicing what you preach? And the interesting thing is, when I talk about my journey in personal development, it really starts just like all the way back to when I was like a kid. I always joke about how when I was 9 years old, I started a book club called NIA, which is the Kwanzaa Principle for Purpose. So here I am, 9 years old, like, y'all, we got to go to the Southwest Library and like get these books on personal development. Like my mother was buying me like chicken noodle soup for the soul when I was a kid. So I've always really been into just personal growth, personal development. It's just kind of ingrained in me. In addition to that, I've always had this knack for planners. I went to my first kind of planning type conference when I was a junior in high school. So I was a part of the Girl Scouts Junior Planning Committee, which was basically where in Atlanta they would get all of these like leaders in the area, and then they would pick like 2 representatives to represent the actual Girl Scouts to go and like plan out what they were going to offer. So I applied, I got the role. I was the one of 2 representatives for hundreds of girls across the country. And I just remember sitting and like all of these women had like their planners, their day runners, as used to call it back in the day. And I remember coming home like, Ma, I got to get a day runner. She was like, girl, you were like 16. What are you going to do with, this professional portfolio? So I say all of that to say, like, a lot of what I see even in my clients is we almost forget at our core, like, what are the things that are super fundamental or present in our personality. And for me, always kind of striving to have best practices, it's just a thing, right? So in my own life, I have been very vigilant about always doing personal development. Like, name the book, name the author, I've probably read them, I probably listened to their podcast. With that being said, life is an evolution. It's a journey. So the type of personal development or healthy habits that I had when I was 25, living in New York, single, performing at my highest in my career, looks very different than what I would consider to be productivity or high performance habits as a mom of 4, a business owner, a wife. So I think that what I do well is check in with myself. So I don't always get it right in terms of, I have the healthiest habits and I have the perfect calendar, but I do a great job of auditing my life, right? So that's that, again, getting still process. Why does it feel like I'm fighting against the current? Why does this feel like it's not in alignment? And allowing myself to kind of evolve with that so that I can move forward. I'll also say that the tools that I use in my program, so my signature program is called Lifecrafting, are all based on tools that I've actually used for myself. And the biggest thing with that is I've learned that personal development is custom to you. So that's kind of where the crafting part of life crafting comes from. It's like, listen, this is your life. Let's craft it out. There's nothing that I do that's going to necessarily work for Dontaira. So let's figure out what's going to work for you. So the answer is yes, a little bit, mostly, but I'm not perfect, obviously.
Right. But at least you can admit that, as opposed to be
Right.
this and that, and I'm this. But to your point, in terms of you being 16 and even being 25 when we lived in New York together, let me bring out my little journal diary.
Okay.
And this is on April 29th, 2012. So at 7:34 a.m. And I said that I went out last night and we went out for a celebration with Chastity, Chloe, and Alena for Chastity's birthday. Good times as always. And then I said, when Alena was bringing me home, because we both lived in Brooklyn, I was telling her how stressed I was. And her response was, why? We have too much to be thankful for. And, our lives could have went very different directions, but they haven't. We are well educated. We travel. We're living in New York. We are healthy, and we have a sound mind. Stop looking at the small picture of what's in front of you and have tunnel vision and look at the larger scale of things. You're only realizing what's happening now and not fully focusing on the bigger picture at hand. Who says that at 25? Like, what the?
First of all, I'm like, oh my God, because it's so funny. I'm saying that to you, and even you saying that, I'm like, girl, that's good advice.
Right.
Wow. How did you even find that?
Listen, so I keep everything. That's number one.
I don't think that I knew you were a hoarder like that.
Yes, I
That's
also
beautiful.
right. And here's the thing, in terms of I'm trying to get more in tune with myself and just trying to revisit who I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because I feel like sometimes I'm trying to hold on to that person, not realizing, like you said, life is about evolution. It's about evolving. There's different seasons of growth and change, and personally, professionally, within your friendships, sisterhood. So, I was just going through, I'm like, what was I talking about 10 years ago when I was 25? Then I was like, ooh, I was stressed for no reason. The things that was stressing me out then, I'm like, whatever.
Listen, and it's just so true, because if we can even think about the reality of that. So I remember that conversation, because this is when you were like in that crazy job, and like those people were like driving you up a wall. And I think that the reason why I was able to kind of see like this bird's eye view is like, I can really see you for who you are, in your truest form, not in your moment or your season. And I think that that is just such a blessing in terms of how we are created in our connection. It's because it's almost like Mila, my virtual assistant, she put something on social the other day that said you can't read the label from inside of the bottle, right? And so in order for us to really see ourselves or see what's out there, we need other people. And so when I talk about, getting away from being isolated, getting back in connection, it's not just to hear myself talk, it's because that is how we're wired. We need other people to read the label for us and say, listen, girl, you can't even see what I see for you right now. Like, you're super talented. And then we obviously look now, 11 years later, and you're like killing the game. Like, you are all the things that I knew you were then, but on that day, it just felt like these people are going to hold me down forever. Wow. You're going to have to send me a picture of that so I can do something creative with it.
No, seriously, I even brought it up in therapy. I was like, so let me tell you some of the things, but that also speaks to like, this is why you're doing what you're doing. It's a natural thing for you. It's not like, oh, I learned this or I did this. Yes, you do have the educational tools behind it, but also it's so much more than that. This has been like years and years in the making. And also, I feel like when we're talking about productivity, self-care, and even to your pregnancy, I remember when we was in our 20s and you were talking about a natural birth. You were talking about a doula. I was looking at you crazy. It was like, isn't that what they have hospitals for? But we were so conditioned to think that. But I'm always saying, like, before it was a trending topic, you were already up on game. And every aspect.
I'm so glad that you remember these things, because again, like, I don't even remember that I like actually was into that, but I'm glad to know that like I've been true to this, not new to this.
Right. Before we had memes, yes, you
exactly.
Talking about it. We would be at like brunch looking like, okay, a water birth.
Wait, what?
Like, we would be at brunch looking at you like, a water birth, a doula. What do you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Girl, if you don't go get, you were like, no.
That is so funny.
So, with Google University and with social media, I feel like sometimes people don't feel that they need to properly invest in themselves, if you will, because they can just get those free resources. So if someone is hesitant in enlisting professional help or like professional services such as yours, what would be your advice for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely am a student of Google University, right? I think that is a wonderful thing. But what we have seen and what the research has shown is that we have really become, a consumption generation, meaning like there's so much information that we consume that sometimes we are not taking action, or we are being paralyzed by so much consumption. And it's literally being thrown at us. So even if we weren't looking for it on Google, we're getting it from every angle. We're getting it on our feed. We're getting it on the news. And so in that, it's almost as if the level of processing that it takes for our physical brain to actually determine how we feel about something is not happening. So that's why we see, things like an increase in anxiety, because we are not able to fully process our feelings. When we get information, most times we're on to the next thing in the next 10 minutes. So what we just read, we don't even know how we feel about it. So then we start feeling numb, and, we just become very automated in how we live because we have no boundaries, right? And so I think that when it comes to comparing consuming information to actually working with a professional is very, very different, because the way that we are actually using the information is a different process, right? So it goes back to what I even talked about in terms of how we are built as humans. We're built to connect with others, right? So I could be thinking something, and then I may reflect that thought to my coach, and she's able to give me a completely different perspective that if it was stuck in my head, I wouldn't be able to fully process if I never got it out, right? So I can even think of a situation in a coaching session yesterday where one of my clients, she literally got on a session going off. She was like, "This is what happened, and I want you to tell me what your thoughts are." And I'm sure that she thought I was going to be like, "Hell yeah, tell her," But me, number one, being able to not be in my emotions, right? Because she's in the heat of the moment, but I'm not. Me not being in my feelings and just taking it at face value. Me also knowing the things that she has been sensitive about in the past, or the things that have been of concern for her in the past, also allow me to have perspective in terms of why this situation upset her so much. Had she not had a coach, she would have probably lost an employee that day, because she would have snapped on her employee. She would have, been saying all these things. But because she has a coach and she knows what we talk about in coaching: think twice, speak once, give yourself time to process, sleep on it, right? Even that term sleep on it generates from the fact that our body all day processes information, and when we go to sleep, our body and our brain gets to work on how we want to process that information. So when we wake up the next day and all of a sudden we have a clear understanding of what we should do, that is actually the value of sleep in terms of how, we regenerate neurons and cells. Anyways, I'm getting too technical, but the point is that in that moment, my ability to help her process it completely changed what happened next, right? So she was able to have a more powerful conversation around leadership with her employee. She was able to recognize that she still had some sensitivities around the particular subject matter that she needed to address in therapy. She also realized at that moment that she is in a different level of her career that's going to require her to not just be excellent as an individual, but to also build and grow excellent leaders, right? Instead of just being you're not good at this person. So think about how much she exponentially grew just off of one scenario, having a coach and having an expert and having a thoughtful conversation, versus if she was just in her own thoughts, determining what she should do next based on what she thinks is right. It's a completely different thing. I always give the example. You don't see, athletes going out here like, "Oh, I'm going to just get on YouTube, figure out how to do a few squats, and hopefully I become this excellent, wrestler." No, they are hiring the best. They're hiring the experts. They're hiring someone who can synthesize information for them, give them a plan, someone who bases the plan off of research and empirical data. So, it's almost like you pay for what you get what you pay for, right? So to some degree, we can all get a taste of things from Google, but excellence and high level performance, you're going to need a professional. And it's definitely not to be considered the same thing.
Right. True. Look, I was just thinking about Beyonce, just hearing all of the taking ballet classes and still at the top of her game, but still taking classes and hiring experts to help her
Right.
continue to
And I
dominate.
think that Beyonce is the queen of finding whoever does something great and bringing them on board. Like she will go and work with the person that has this type of sound, this type of, artistry. Like she doesn't just stick with one person. She's like, listen, who's the best to do it in this city? Who's the best to do this type of production? And she goes and seeks them out. And then she adds her own flavor to it, but she's not going into it blind, assuming that she knows everything, which is why I believe that, she's able to kind of give us new and fresh stuff all the time, because she is kind of moving in that realm where she is considering other people.
Well, here's the thing. You said Beyonce, she finds the best people. She needs to come and find me. Me
Listen,
and you.
one step away. I'm just waiting on that day when we get that text in the chat. Like, all you gotta say is it's finished, and we gonna know. Pack up the bags. We finished selling. Everybody working together on this project.
Exactly, for years in the making.
Right.
But you just actually, I want to take a step back to the previous story you talked about your client in terms of building effective leadership and sleeping on it. But communication is so important, like these days, and I feel like sometimes the art of communication gets lost, especially in like this digital space. So aside from just being a listener, what are 2 or 3 other communication skills to set yourself up for success?
That's such a great question. When I even think about the program, one of the things that's part of my simple method, which is kind of our methodology, is we talk about relationships, right? And how do you not just have them, but how do you create flourishing relationships? And we all know that the core and the foundation is communication skills. That's even in like every healthy marriage, right? So one activity, and I'll give you a tactical activity right now that I love to do in my own life, but also that I love to share with clients, is this idea of making sure that we are actually listening and we're actively and constructively responding, right? So we call that active constructive responses. So that means, okay, your husband comes home and he's like, I got a new job. All right. You can have someone who is pessimistic, um, a pessimistic, passive listener. So what that means is you basically ignore them. Like, oh, okay, right? Like, that's not a big deal. I just got promoted. I'm not going to even acknowledge it, right? And the negative side of it could even be like, why? You barely are home now, right? Like that's really just responding in a way where it's like you're thinking about your own needs. You're not even thinking about how they need you to support them right now. Then the other way is, it may not necessarily be negative, but it's kind of like passive in the sense of you don't even necessarily congratulate them. Hey, hon, I just got a promotion today at work. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, dinner's on the table, right? So it's kind of like you ignored them, but you didn't necessarily say anything negative, but you didn't acknowledge it to let them know that you actually care that they, have it, right? Then the other side of it is, you're acknowledging, oh, I just got a promotion today, but then you're also kind of being negative about it. Like, okay, well, that's good, but, is that going to be good for the family, right? Or kind of starting to ask questions. Then you have this positive, like optimistic, active listening, where if someone tells you something, not only do you acknowledge what they're saying, but you drive the conversation forward. And this is where we want to live for most of our communication. Hey, hon, I just got offered a new promotion. Oh, wow. Congratulations. Now, some people could just stop there and that would still kind of be the passive side of it. So it'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm happy for you, but come eat dinner. What we want to make sure that we're doing is congratulations. What do you think that you did in these last 6 months that made them think that you were a qualified candidate? Because at that point, not only does it say, I am proud of you, but it really shows like I actually am communicating that I want to know more. And we know that people really thrive off of being able to tell more about what happened. So one of the things that has just taken my relationship to the next level is even when my kids are talking to me, and we constantly will brush off kids. Oh my God, look, I just drew a unicorn. Oh, that's so pretty. And then you go back to watching TV, right? That's
Mhm.
that optimistic but still passive aggression that is like, okay, well, she's on to the next. But instead is, oh my God, that is so beautiful. I love the way that really stayed inside of the lines. Where did you learn how to do that? And it's like, soon as you kind of give that next step of communication, you are opening up a very powerful relationship between you and the next person, because you're taking it beyond just acknowledgement to actually, I care. I'm here. I'm present. So I always tell people, test it out. As soon as your husband or your spouse or your friend tells you some good news, don't just congratulate them. Feed into it. Ask them what happened next. Why did that happen? Tell me how you did this, and watch how they light up. Okay. So that's my first, that's a good
Right.
exercise that I use with a lot of my clients. And then when it comes to the other side of communication, is we spend a lot of time on boundaries, and I think that this goes into just overall healthy habits, and is how do we communicate those boundaries in a way that are effective. And typically I'll give people scripts. I always recommend a book called, and I'll probably tag it later for you. But it's called, Healthy Boundaries or something. I can't remember. I have to show you. But even in that, it's about learning how to say no, learning how to say no, period. Also making sure that you are responding in a way that fully reflects how you feel. So not just saying, hey, you know, um, I feel this way, and not fully getting your thoughts out because someone has cut you off, but also having the communication to say, hey, I appreciate you saying these things, but this is my decision because of X, Y, and Z. And in doing so, you're really owning, hey, I think that the way that we communicate with each other is, could be very powerful if I receive your feedback, but I can also still feel very organic and aligned with my own values. And we
Mhm.
don't have to compromise. And that's going to really build relationships when people don't have to be forced to think the way that you think and can still be in alignment. Does that make sense?
It does, and it seems very challenging because if I have a good idea or a thought, it's clearly good for a reason, and I'm telling you, so I need you to think before I say no. So that could be frustrating. No, but it's actually very
Yeah.
good. But that's part of why we need your services, so we can better understand and break it down, just like you did. Like everyone's not
Yeah.
going to think like you, and everyone's
Yeah.
communication skills aren't the same. So definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
So the reminder remedy, 1 year down.
Yeah.
Forever to go. What's next?
Oh, man, that is a great question. So, right now, over the last year, I have really been perfecting my craft, pun intended, as I put together the second iteration of my life crafting program. And I really want to make it where it can be widely available to people, because right now it's a private one-on-one service, and I've pretty much maxed out at one-on-one clients in terms of how many I can take. But I not only want to be able to open it up for more people, I want to make it affordable, because I know that for many of us, we're just now starting to get into therapy. Many of us are starting businesses. So it becomes this thing where it's like, well, what do I invest in first? Right. Me personally, I'm going to always tell you, you need that quarterback first. You need that life coach. You need someone that's going to help you kind of come in and do this audit of where you are. I think that a lot of people first, jump into business coaching or marketing coaching or copywriting or all these things that they think are going to translate into money. And it's like, oh, I just built this whole business, but now I can't even really get the train moving because I have no time in my regular calendar, or I got, my home life that's preventing me from moving forward. And so, what life crafting is all about is being mindfully productive. It's thinking about how do we make sure that we are fully aligned in terms of our values, and making sure that those show up right, in our day to day. And so with the life crafting program, I'm going to have it available on demand. So people can access it, people can come in and have a place to start. And then the Reminder Remedy Coaching Company is going to start offering specialized coaches, right? So that means you come through our program to kind of get your foundation of like, who am I? You know, what do I believe? What do I feel? How do I want to spend my days? What do I want my 9 to 5 to look like in the sense of my jobs, but also my calendar? You know, what is my energy like on day to day? How do I craft my life around there? Like, there are so many moving pieces into how you set up a productive and high performing life. All of that stuff needs to come first. But then once someone goes through the life crafting program, they will then get access to all of these specialty coaches. So I have an intimacy coach that I'm going to be bringing on board, a parenting coach that I'm going to be bringing on board, a nutrition coach. So really, like, if there are certain areas of your life, like right now, parenting is like, girl, this is my whole nemesis. I'm trying to figure it out because all these kids got different, different personalities. So outside of me having my quarterback, I'm now throwing it to the specialist to say, hey, let me have an additional 30-minute session with you specifically on this domain of life that I feel like needs a little bit more of attention. And so I think that that's going to help a lot of people who feel like, okay, the chicken or the egg first, right? So being able to give them this robust approach where it's like, okay, you come in, we're forcing you to slow down so that you can really figure out where you're headed, right? And then from there, based on the results of that kind of core program, we can now see these are the top 3 areas that you need attention in, business coach, health coach and parenting coach. And then we give you access to all of our internal specialty coaches. So I'm hoping to really start to scale to that. In 2022, we won't have all of the specialty coaches at once, but I do have 3 of those primary areas that I feel like most of my clients need. And we're going to go from there. And so, that was something that was really important to me starting out, was making sure that this business or this practice was not just alenaconley.com. I wanted to really make it where it could scale to house and employ coaches, because I'm going to be honest, like, it's hard to get work as a employed coach. Like, normally you got to go and start your own business, which means you got to learn how to market, you got to learn how to sell. And some of us just really want to coach. Like, we just want to be in our zone of genius. And so I would love to make it where my practice can, work with up and coming coaches and experts who really just don't want to do that front end. They just want to get right to it. And so that's kind of my 12 to 24 month vision, is really making that core program accessible to people. Starting this year, actually, it'll be available in the next, we'll say by the end of the year, so soon as everything gets done. And then we'll really start scaling with those other coaches next year.
Okay, putting in the action. I feel like, but also I feel like adulthood, womanhood, this journey is very challenging, and I feel I was not expecting this. So it's just so many layers, like you just said, from a nutritionist, what you put into your body, it also affects your energy, it affects your way of thinking, it affects it all. Just all the different dynamics. But I'm curious, so you're talking a lot about your clients, but along this journey, what has surprised you so far about yourself?
Well, I would say that what I've realized is that in order for me to be the person that I want to be, there are a lot of levers that I'm going to have to get in order, right? And I have to be very diligent about them. So I mentioned on my Instagram the other day about this book called High Performing Habits. And it's probably the first book that I feel like accurately summarizes a lot of material that I've read over the last decade in terms of just like emotional well-being, overall well-being, as someone who has, these high goals. And so me coming straight off that book, what I realized is that if I want to be a high performer, and so when we think about high performance, we're talking about people who are able to not only achieve their goals and hit their milestones, but they're able to do it without driving themselves into the ground, burning out, their relationships suffering, their kids barely knowing them. High performing individuals are the ones that you're like, oh my God, like everything she touched turned into gold and she still looked good. She don't got wrinkles everywhere because of stress. She's not on every, antidepressant because she secretly hates her life. It's someone who has somehow figured out how to become a master of all of these things. And it's not this inherent trait that people are born with. It is very intentional activity. All right. So what it looks like is, number one, you know that your energy is your biggest source of currency, right? It is how you perform and how you make impact, right? So we think about energy as like not just, a ton of energy, but also like positive emotion, gratitude. Like one of the things that you read in there that reminded me, like, oh, I need to be, I think that I probably remember that season in my life because I was really on like my gratitude flow, which is like the source of all great things. But having, in being able to induce positive emotion. So that means there are things that significantly impact that. The number one thing is probably sleep. I've been talking about this all year. Like sleep is my biggest superpower. And it seems like such a simple thing. But if we don't utilize sleep as like our core way to like perform at our highest level, then everything else is just not going to matter. Like coffee, supplements, exercise, everything is going to come second to sleep. So a high performer says, I am vigilant about 8 to 9 hours or 7 to 8 hours. It's non-compromising, right? Like that's how you have to think about sleep, because it then impacts everything else, right? We know that exercising is something that is the only thing that you can really do to fully optimize your brain. So when I think about my own life, exercise has been a big source of contention, but I had to do the work around why do I resent exercise so much? And me, when we lived in Brooklyn, I was at the gym every day. So it's not that I don't like working out. So I had to do the work to figure out, why am I not excelling in this particular area? And I realized that I had a lot of trauma from working with a particular personal trainer that left me feeling lesser than. It was a very sensitive moment for me. And so I realized like, oh, my brain is still associating exercise not as this source of fuel, but more so as like somebody telling you still need to lose weight and you ain't shit, basically. And so when I realized that, I've had to start doing like this self-talk around like, girl, you are a high performer. These next 15 minutes are going to allow you to, bust through this work 10 times faster because your brain is on 10 now, right? So it's like you're always trying to find those ways to get your body to perform optimally so that you can have a heightened sense of focus. When you have more focus, you get things done faster. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm now slept, I'm eating well, I've worked out, my brain, say if my brain can get to a 10, right? Instead of being at an average of a 4 or 5, it's now at like an 8 to 10 every day. So that means if I have 3 hours to work, I can be laser focused. I'm not multitasking, I'm not anxious because I have kind of fueled myself naturally. Now that I can focus for 3 hours, work that maybe have taken the average person all day or maybe even 3 days, I can bust out in 3 hours. So that means that instead of me staying here till 6, like the rest of the team, I can log off at 2 o'clock and be at carpool and be present with my kids when I get home and read a book and do all of these other things that I value because I perform at the highest level when I need to. And that's really where we want to get. That's where I want to get. I want to get to a place where my body is so high functioning and my brain is so high functioning that when it's time for me to sit down and come up with a campaign or come up with a strategy or do something for a client, like I'm all in. And when it's time to turn it off, I can turn it off with no regrets and really live life. Right. And so when we think about productivity for busy women, that's what it looks like. It's looking like, how do we come in and, number one, identify what are the top 3 things that you want right now in this season? And what do we have to do to get you there? We got to pull some stuff back. We got to delegate some stuff. We got to automate some stuff. We got to eliminate some stuff. And then once we do that, we're at the core of you being in your zone of genius. And anything outside of that zone of genius has to go. So that's kind of how I personally strive. It's like, okay, I know the three things that I want to spend the majority of my time doing. Is that what my life looks like? No, right now, almost, because I work at it, right? But I know that it's a process, and again, it changes in every season. And so I'm just really striving to kind of learn how to pull those levers, and I'm doing that with my clients as well. So it's built-in accountability. I
Well,
feel like
you
every question I end up with a laugh because I'm like, I'm I think it's hilarious talking about myself.
said I like that too sometimes.
Normally on the other side.
Right. Oh yeah, that is right. Don't laugh. It's just me and you. But you said like your zone of genius. Like that
No.
is genius. Because I wrote that down and I was like, oh, I'm trying to get to my zone of genius. So you talk a lot about your clients, but I'm curious in terms of clientele, do you look for a specific thing, like I guess specifics when people are coming to you? Do you have to be a mom? Do you have to be 10 years in your career? Like, or no? Can you tell me more about the clientele that you look to bring on board?
Yeah, so I would say that I work with ambitious women, people who want to be high performing, right? So they have that desire. The reality is that most won't. Like most don't have an interest in like optimizing every area of their life. They're just kind of like, listen, I'm about to go to work, do these people job, go home, do my thing, right? So I would say that typically the type of person who is looking to hire a coach goes back to what we said before. They're the person that's trying to go to the Olympics, right? So naturally, that's who comes to me, and that's who I want to work with. I want to work with people who are ready to put in the work, because life coaching is not just a show up, right? It's a show up and then leave and implement, right? So coaching in general is different from counseling or therapy, because you can go to a therapy session and you're really just kind of talking through your trauma. You're trying to get back to neutral in your life. It's a great space for someone to hold space.
Mhm.
Coaching, you're going to come, and every session is going to be, okay, what are your action items? What are your takeaways? And what is the first thing that I should ask you when we get back together in 2 weeks? So I would say that 95% of my clients come ready to work, and they do work. I've probably had, maybe one or two clients who didn't do homework, and I don't even like to call it homework, because it's like, this is your life. This is not homework. This is stuff that you need to do. I've maybe had one or two clients where it just wasn't the right season, right? So meaning like things were just so maxed out, right? There was no margin to do anything. And it almost felt like coaching became more of a burden than a help. So, I think that it's really about kind of having that desire. Like I just signed a client 2 days ago, a 12-month client, okay, which I'm super excited about, because I've now found that 12 months is like my sweet spot of like, your life looks completely different.
Mhm.
And she just said, Alena, I have been following you for years. And I've always wanted to do something like this, but everything that I ever invested in was for somebody else. Like I always felt like it was selfish to invest in this type of money for myself. And the moment that, she knew, okay, in order for me, she just got this big promotion, in order for me to get to this next level in my job and still show up for my 7-year-old and this baby that's in my belly and my husband and run my house, I need somebody with me. Like I can't do this alone. And so when people get to that point, that's when I know like they're ready, because they're like, okay, let's get to it. Let's get it.
Yeah, you actually brought up a good point about people who like they ready to go to the Olympics. I interviewed Sonia Richards Ross, and that was one. Yes, she told me that she hired a mental and emotional performance coach. She was like, I
Mm-hmm.
had my athletic coach to help me. She was like, but to win the Olympics and win gold and stand on that podium, you need so much more. You need to be able
Yeah.
to alleviate the naysayers. You need to be able to quiet your mind. You need to be able to um, become one with yourself. and speak
Mm-hmm.
that, speak those words of affirmations, shift that energy. So she said that's what she thinks ultimately really helped her kind of
Yeah.
laser focus and
And we
remain on.
know that, like, it all starts in the mind, right? And it's like there can be athletes that are like at the top of their game, but if they deal with something in their personal life, or if they read the wrong comment, that could mess up the rest of the, the games that they're in. And I was actually just listening to an episode on Tim Ferriss's podcast. He's like my favorite podcaster, but he had a performance coach who's worked with all of these like top tennis players. And, he talks about how one of the things that he does with them is he creates what they call their personal Credo journal. So it means that anytime, like if they have like, negative self-talk that typically reoccurs, because most of our self-talk that's negative is reoccurring, like it's always around like the same 5 things that we feel, like that we're not good enough in. So he basically has almost like scripts that, okay, when this happens, when this thought comes to my mind, this is what I'll instead say. And they journal those scripts. They literally like manifest them in terms of affirming the opposite. And he was like, people said that out of everything that they've done, just being able to, every time they have a negative thought, write it down and replace it with a script, that activity alone took people to the next level. And it's just like we can't just assume we're gonna wake up happy, right? Because guess what? You could wake up happy and 5 minutes later you get a phone call. Or in my case, my 2-year-old comes in because he didn't sleep well and has an attitude. So now his energy could shift my whole day, even as a 2-year-old. So what am I going to do to make sure I have my own arsenal of tools to maintain my energy, my mindset, my focus? Because I mean, it has to actively be engaged in how we live.
Yeah, for sure. I had to do the biggest smile when you said create the babies. I love watching them on your page. I miss them.
Girl,
I have to come visit.
please come
Um,
visit them.
oh, it's on. It's on and popping. And then these are just my last few questions. What are
Mhm.
the most like common misconceptions that women come to you and trying to deal with, or just trying to figure out?
Um, in terms of what? When you say misconceptions?
Whether it can be work, personal, do many of them, I guess, deal with like imposter syndrome? You see a lot of your clients dealing with that. Is it
Yeah.
more so self-esteem, or is it just like I'm trying to get this parenting thing? I'm trying to be CEO, or but I can't do it. Like, what are some of the most common misconceptions? Or I can't have work-life balance. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say that the biggest misconception is what productivity actually looks like, right? So, like, in our culture, we think that the purpose of a planner is to fill it up to capacity and then somehow check it all off every single day. And it's like, that is complete bullshit. Like, we have been taught, if you have extra time, fill it up with more tasks. And
Mhm.
so that becomes like a big mindset shift when people start working with me, because I say, I want you to achieve more by doing less. I want you to slow down. I want you to speed up by slowing down, or slow down to speed up is typically how I say it. And all of those go back to, I remember somebody asked me one time in a group chat, Alena, how do you do all of this? Because she had just started a business. How do you run a business? I see you working with this person and you have all these kids. And my response was, I don't. And it's laughable that you think that I would, right? And
Mhm.
so that goes back to, again, figuring out, what those values are so that they can determine your time. So the big misconception around productivity is not how can I do more with the time that I have, is how can I focus on what's most important so that I have more time for the things that I want to do. Also, this concept of like building in margin, like being productive is also being able to create freedom in your life, right? So if you don't have space and margin and freedom, something about your day is not productive. And I'm not saying, oh, you got to check off 10 things. Because number one, you should never have more than 3 things on your to-do list, period. And
Yep.
so, I always tell people, look at productivity as the source to having the freedom to do absolutely nothing. So if
Mhm.
on a given day in the week, if you can't afford to just do nothing, then you are not being productive enough, right? Because we want to give ourselves time for, if something happens tomorrow and I need to pick up and go, my schedule is not packed to the capacity where I have no time to breathe. So learning how to build in margin, learning how to build out blocks for you to catch your breath, build out blocks for you to read, build out blocks for you to, just have play, right? I have this whole idea. People always say for things like, oh, why are you going on vacation if you haven't hit your goals yet? That's the dumbest shit anybody could ever say. All right. And no offense if you said that, but, or even if you think it. So let me retract how I said that. That is unfortunate that we think that way. And the reason why is because the research shows that play and fun actually hyper produce creativity. So if you are a business owner and you're waiting until you're done with the entire project to give yourself any type of fun or play, you are actually missing out on being able to unlock some of your greatest genius. So I always tell people, if you feeling burnt out or stuck, escape, like turn off everything for 2 days. I guarantee you that you're going to come back with 20 new ideas about what you could be doing to improve your process, how you should handle a conversation, because it's something about play and fun and inspiration that resets the brain, right? And so those are probably some of the things that people are shocked by. It's just like, no, I don't want you to become more efficient in the sense of that you do more. And no, I don't want you to celebrate. I don't want you to wait until the outcome to celebrate. I want you to understand the value in the process. And so those are probably the things that I would say, we try to readjust in the beginning.
I mean, I've been saying this for years, but I really do need to help enlist your services, because you just said you shouldn't have more than 3 things on your to-do list. I was like, wait a minute.
First of all, that list is so overwhelming. Like, I literally feel the hair on my back. And I can imagine that as soon as you see it, the neurons in your brain are probably like a cartoon, like, because the thing is, like, even if you do have all of those things, you need to look at that list and decide based on the time that I have today, right? So looking at your calendar, and you may have 3 meetings in the day and you have 2 open spaces to actually do stuff, right? And you can look at your list and say, what can I actually get done in this 1.5 hour block? Oh, that's a 3-hour task. That's not going to go there. Oh, that's a 2-minute task that needs to go up in this break. So it's kind of like making sure that it really makes sense for the day. And if it's not going to be able to fit on the day, then it shouldn't be on your list. You can have like a whole list of stuff, but not something that you're looking at every day. Like, pick the 3 things that can fit on today's task. And then, put everything else out of your view, because we don't need that extra source of stress.
I feel like it's also aligns with working smarter, not harder, and not constantly me feeling like a hamster wheel, like I'm in a hamster wheel every day, which is what I do.
Okay. You say that one more time?
I said it's also, I feel like, a reflection of trying to learn how to work smarter, not harder. And that's probably why I'm constantly feeling like I'm in a hamster wheel all day, every day. Like, no time.
And that's honestly most of us, right? It's like, we always like, okay, when things slow down, that's when I'm gonna get organized. And the reality is, like, it's never gonna slow down. It's just never, life is never gonna slow down. So we basically have to make the choice. We have to say, okay, I'm taking these next 7 days to just figure out how I want my life to run. And I would love to do the activity with you. One of my line sisters, she booked me literally for just 3 sessions. And she said, Alena, I have so much going on. I feel like I can never catch my breath. But I know that if I don't catch my breath, I can't get ahead. And in just those 3 sessions, when I tell you, I'm just such a proud coach. Like, she's like, girl, like, I got my nails done in the middle of the day and I still got my work done. Like, that would have never happened before, because I'm so organized and I have my task list. And, it's just, it's something that can be done, but we have to just stop and say, I'm ready to just like become this best version of myself. I'm ready to make my life reflective of the things that I want and the person that I want to be. Right. I think that for me, and going back to your question earlier around, what about your own life that, how do you do this in your own life? I think that my life forced me to be this person. And the reason why I say that is because, Parker, my oldest, he is dyslexic, and he also deals with some sensory processing. And so what that looks like is, as a parent, we all have to use a certain level of patience, but this type of patience is next level. Okay. I have to be, his needs, emotional needs from me are at such a high level that I can't just be living by the seat of my, my chair. I have to be able to have my life at a pace that I can truly assess his needs every day, in addition to my other 3 children. And so I noticed that, like, if there's days where I'm snappy at him in particular and he's super sensitive, then I realized, oh, there was something in my calendar today that put me on edge. And I can literally go back to my phone and see, like, oh, that's why I don't have patience with my kids today, because I like triple booked. So now my energy has been impacted, which then impacts my patience, which then impacts how I mother. So if I've said that one of my top priorities is my family and my parenting style, I can't have a schedule that's crazy as hell, because it's not going to make the best version of me as a parent. And so my children really forced me to figure out, how do I make it where at 4:00 my day is done.
Mm-hmm.
I work late one day a week, and that's on Thursdays. But other than that, I don't work at all. And the work hasn't, gotten there. It hasn't decreased. I just have to be more efficient with my time, so that by the time I get to the most important part of my day, I'm not completely spent, And so I think that I'm thankful that kind of made me slow down and realize, okay, like, how do I fix this, right? Like, how do I make it where I'm not just always angry because he's so needy, instead being like, my child needs me. What else is more important than this? Like, fix everything else. Like, he's not the one that needs fixing, so.
Yeah. Oh, Parker, give him a hug for me. And then these are actually my last 2 questions, and these are like kind of fire round. Actually, last 3 questions. So it's just what comes to the top of mind first. So, in one sentence, can you give women getting up, looking in the mirror every morning, a piece of advice on how to conquer the day?
Yeah. So I would say, having a morning ritual, right? I'm not even talking about your morning routine.
One
Which is,
sentence.
shit. Sorry. Start over. I have a problem being concise. Start over. What's the question?
What advice can you give to women getting up, looking in the mirror every morning to conquer the day? The piece of advice is in one sentence.
Okay. I would tell them to say affirmations to themselves in the mirror.
Oh, perfect. So what is the affirmation you have for yourself?
I am enough. There we go.
There we go.
That is my affirmation of the season. I am enough. Actually, I am enough right now. That's my affirmation.
In this very moment.
Yes. This very moment.
What is mine? Mine is make it happen.
I love it.
Figure it out. Make it happen. That's mine.
Figure it out.
Right. And then the last question. But what comes to mind first? Any last words of wisdom, anything you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
I would just have to leave with the same way we always sign off on the podcast, and that's everything you got is everything you need.
Yes. Good friends. Great coaches. All that. We're living in a space of gratitude and living in a place of abundance. So yay. Well, thank you so much. Congratulations again on the 1-year anniversary of the Reminder Remedy. And for those, please go visit the website, thereminderremedy.com, as well as visit on Instagram. And the handle is the Reminder Remedy. So have a
wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation. I'm so proud of you as well. And free session on me.
And listen, I'm about to be in the group chat, so about that free session.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Love you, girl. Bye.
Love
Congratulations.
You.